Well, a while back, if you'll recall, I was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and had the chance to visit a museum in development called the World War II American Experience, which was this incredible collection of World War II vehicles. And in the first episode, had the opportunity to get inside of a Sherman tank and see all kinds of different vehicles in the Buck collection. And then in a later video, I came back and actually had a chance to drive the tank. Well, now I am back in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and holy smokes, look at this place. This is the finished product of the World War II American Experience. They've moved from storage and now have this incredible collection on display just outside of Gettysburg. So we're going to take a look at some vehicles that we didn't get a look at before, and maybe drive a few around and see what the inside of this incredible place looks like. Now, if you'll remember back to those first videos with the World War II American Experience, we featured a lot of the vehicles in the Buck collection. There was, of course, the Sherman tanks, and then some of the tank recovery vehicles like the Dragon Wagon. One that we really didn't focus on much is this thing right here. This is a World War II Halftrack. Now, if you'll remember, the guy who really knows about all of these World War II vehicles is not me. It's Adam Buck. So anyway, Adam's going to kind of walk us through the World War II Halftrack, and then we're going to take it for a spin and then go inside and see how things look in this new facility.
Hi, I'm Adam Buck. I'm here at the World War II American Experience Museum. I'm a founding member, along with my parents, of this new museum in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I'm standing here next to an M5 Halftrack that is currently on display here at the museum. Now, we'll zoom out a little bit. The Halftrack was a lightly armored vehicle, obviously half track, half wheels, used during the Second World War. This particular version is an M5 International Halftrack, which was an armored personnel carrier. If you come around the back here, you can load up to 10 guys in the back, take them into battle. We've got a 50 caliber machine gun on the pedestal in the center of the vehicle. Now, a little bit of background on the International Halftrack. The International came into play building half-tracks because the M3, the M2, which were built by White, Autocar, Diamond T, they couldn't build enough. So International was able to come into play, build some half-tracks. Now, the half-tracks that International built, the M5, the M9, those were used for Lend-Lease. The Commonwealth nations used a lot of those. Now, some people say the U.S. didn't use the International Halftrack. Well, we did. We used them in training in the U.S. And personally, as a collector, I like the M5, the M9 half-tracks better. I think they're kind of a cooler vehicle. Some differences: you got bumperettes in the back, and you have the signature round armor. The M3, the M2s, those would have angular armor in the back, so just a telltale sign of the differences. We've got our mine rack on the side. Of course, folding armor here if you're in a hot area. And the armor folds down in front of the windshield as well. So another difference with the International Halftracks is the flat fenders. So just some of the differences, if you really want to get nitpicky about half-tracks, those are some of the differences. But these are great vehicles. You might wonder why a half-track, not a 6x6 truck that was armored. Well, a half-track could do a heck of a lot better in all-terrain environments versus a 6x6 truck. I was just talking to someone earlier today about the non-directional tires. Non-directional because the tire patterns in the mud or the snow, enemy troops couldn't tell what direction the vehicle was going. Now that's great if you're trying to trick the enemy, but for traction in the mud or snow, they're about useless. You pretty much always need to put chains on. If you're in the Battle of the Bulge, you see a lot of tire chains on the vehicles. But with a half track, you could really do well in all-terrain environments.
Okay, well, I've ridden in a Sherman and I've ridden in some of the other vehicles here. This is going to be my first time in a half track, and it is hard to get in this thing while holding a camera. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, here we go. On this half track, and right now it kind of looks like we're going through the Normandy bocage right here in Pennsylvania, and this area would hold about 10 guys, and a lot of armored infantry would use these half tracks. This is designed just to get guys in and get them out, but it is hooked up with this 50 caliber machine gun just in case they get into a pinch. Pretty cool being in this vehicle. I think that settles it. I need a half track. That thing is cool as heck. And it's one of the many vehicles that they have here at the museum. Now they have all kinds of things that they're going to be doing at this museum, all kinds of events and talks and book signings and things like that. There's actually an event this evening called a Tank Talk where a retired Army colonel is going to be coming in and kind of giving a briefing or rundown on the Sherman tank. So I'll film a little bit of that later. But we're going to dodge inside and take a look at what they have in the new museum here. Okay, we just got in here and you can see there's some activity here in the museum, but check this out. This is a Japanese Type 95 scout car. This was captured in Burma, and it is one of 3 surviving vehicles of its type in the world. This is the only one that is located within the United States. And then of course, they have some other Japanese captured items out on display here, some bayonets and some Arisakas. But yeah, that is literally the only one of its kind here in the U.S. Here as you come in, they also have another vehicle. This one is on loan like the Japanese scout car. This is a German SS Kübelwagen, and it was built April 6th of 1944. And to the best of what they can tell, this was captured in Normandy, but they're not completely sure. But yeah, very interesting. Not too many places you can go and see vehicles like this. Okay, so we just came into the main vehicle gallery here. I don't know if that's what it's officially called, but that's what I'm calling it. And we saw where the vehicles were before, but look at the space that they are in now. This is incredible. So here we have the Dragon Wagon right over here, and we also have this fuel vehicle and there are several Jeeps that I'm seeing, and different armored personnel carriers. Okay, there is a lot that is here, and unlike the old area where they had all these vehicles, what I'm seeing is a lot of space where you can actually kind of go around and really get some perspective on the size and the functionality of these vehicles. Okay, now here are a few things that we saw in some of the earlier videos that belong to Matthew Ridgeway. So they have Matthew Ridgeway's hat, his footlocker, all kinds of different things. But yeah, we've seen those in the other videos. I don't know if we saw this though. This is a Jeep in its original shipping container. So that's pretty darn interesting. And then also, if we go over here, this is a piece that I think is on loan here at the museum, but this is a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. So all kinds of new and interesting things to see here. Now, Adam was telling me that they're in the process of getting a lot of these displays built out. This is one that they have for the 10th Mountain Division. This is a 1942 M29 cargo carrier that was nicknamed the Weasel. So this would be used in like small mountainous areas and snowy terrain. Pretty interesting vehicle there. And then we also have an M4 speed tractor. So again, as we've said in the other videos, and as we said here, you can come to this museum and just see vehicles that you simply won't see anywhere else. Now, here is a vehicle that we saw in another one of the videos, but not in its full glory. Look at this. So this is really just kind of a mobile shop. So this is not a vehicle, again, that you're really going to even know existed for the most part. But these things would be equipped with welders and with grinders and with all kinds of tools to do in-field repairs. Really an amazing vehicle, and to see it all kind of, again, spread out here is really something else. Here are a few other displays for the 10th Mountain Division and also the 1st Special Service Brigade, which is really interesting. And then also look at this. Look at this dadgum jerry can collection that they have. That is quite the collection of jerry cans there. I imagine that George Patton would be all over that. Okay, so those are a few of the vehicles here in this area. There's another area called the motor pool that has dozens more. The vehicles that probably are going to attract the most attention are going to be the Sherman tanks, which we have already seen in the other videos. We're going to come back to these here in a little bit. The colonel's going to kind of walk us through some of this. We'll film a little bit of it. Right now, they're having dinner, and I'm not. So I'm going to shut this camera off. I'm going to go get my belly full, and then we're going to come back out here to this vehicle assembly area.
Safety briefings for these tanks. We've got some drone coverage overhead. One of the things we like to point out when we do our safety briefings whenever we get aboard these things is tanks are inherently dangerous. Okay? And if you're not careful in a tank, it will kill a member of its crew as quickly as you go in. That's not going to happen here. safely. Again, this is a late war example of the American M4 medium tank, commonly referred to as the Sherman. This particular example would have had all of those late war product improvements and innovations that I mentioned.
Okay, so we've been getting some legit tank lessons from this guy right here. This is Al Coase, who is a retired colonel.
Yep.
Is that right? And has spent a considerable amount more time in a tank than me. But anyway, he's been teaching us a lot and had some pretty interesting things that he had to say about the Sherman that I didn't know.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about ammunition stowage on the Sherman series of tanks with JD. In earlier versions of the Sherman, the ammunition was stored in what we call the sponsons, port and starboard side. These are what we refer to, this area is what we refer to as the sponsons. Obviously a very vulnerable area, and the designers realized that very early on. Shortly after the tank debuted in North Africa in British hands, they started to realize that storing ammunition up here might not be the best idea. In tanks that have their ammunition stored that way, therefore, what you'll often find is a series of metal plates along both sponsons on the sides of the tank in those areas where the ammunition is stored. That is how the tank early on developed a reputation of going up in flames when it was breached. A lot of people attributed that to fuel. It was actually the ammunition combusting. So again, that interim fix was to put a series of extra armor plates along the side of the tank. In this version of the tank, a late war version of the tank, they had moved to something called wet storage, where they moved storage of the ammunition from the sponsons, port and starboard side, and centralized them in a metal box, a double-walled metal box, down in the bottom of the hull. That was a much less vulnerable position, obviously, but the big advantage was that between the walls of that metal box there was a glycol solution, something akin to antifreeze. Well, when a tank hull or turret is breached with enemy fire, obviously you're going to get a lot of shrapnel and spalling and metal flying around the inside. Well, that simple innovation of those two walls with the solution was sufficient to lower the ambient temperature and the kinetic energy of that shrapnel such that the ammunition would no longer combust. And it actually helped to improve the survivability of these tanks about 75%. So it was a relatively simple yet pretty important innovation.
Interesting. And so the Ronson thing was post-war, right?
Yeah, people have used the analogy, it's like a Ronson lighter lights first time every time. That was actually a post-war advertising thing. So, but a lot of people will use that as a means to defame the Sherman a little bit. The tank, over the years, of course, the war, there was a school of thought that it was substandard and no match for its German counterparts, but for a lot of the reasons I alluded to earlier, I believe it was a competitive tank throughout the war that faced some challenges at the end, but they were limited challenges. I talked about tank production earlier on. There were over 49,500 Sherman tanks made during the war. German tank production number totaled about 47,000, and of those, just over 6,600 of those were the famed Panther tank, and just over 1,600 were the Tiger tank. So they just weren't a prevalent force on the battlefield. In most cases, they were tactically and operationally insignificant. This tank, the numbers that it was made, was used by all the Allies in every theater of the war, was infamously reliable. And so for many of those reasons, I maintain that it was a capable weapon system throughout. And the other thing I like to point out is that most tank-on-tank engagements, there's a number of variables in them. And it's not just the size of the gun or the accuracy aim points. You've got variables like terrain, weather, and the most important variable is the tank crew. How proficient are they in putting steel on target? So when you consider all of that collectively, I think the Sherman in some regards excuse me, developed a bad reputation that was not deserved. Remember, too, that this tank was competitive from the time it debuted in North Africa, being the industry standard then, all the way up till about the fall of 1944, when we started to encounter any concentrations of panthers and tiger tanks.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us this evening.
Okay, thank you, JD.
All right, well, there you go. So we still got people out there crawling around on the tank and getting inside and looking around and asking questions and learning more about the Sherman. One of the things that Al was saying that I found interesting that I didn't know was at the very beginning of World War II, there were less than 300 tanks in the United States. Throughout the course of the war, American manufacturing kicked in, became the arsenal of democracy, and this country ended up churning out, I think it was 49,500 tanks, which is absolutely incredible. Just the power of manufacturing in this country and what it did to help win the war. But anyway, whenever you come to this museum, that's what you're learning about. You're learning about the Americans who fought abroad, the Americans who did the work at home, who all contributed to the war effort and to the other allies to defeat tyranny in Europe and in Asia. So anyway, definitely come to this museum whenever you come to Gettysburg. It's an amazing place. Hey, wanted to jump on here real quick with one more quick thing. So whenever I'm on the road, like what I am right now, well, obviously, I'm using my computer, using my phone, utilizing a lot of data, and it can be a little bit risky whenever you're out on the road as far as your personal information being exploited by some nefarious person. So it's important to have something called a VPN. And this year I've been using something called NordVPN, which I have been beyond satisfied with. Let me show you how it works. Now, in case you didn't know, the VPN in NordVPN stands for Virtual Private Network. And really, in simple terms, what this is doing is protecting your internet connection and protecting your online identity by hiding your IP address. And look at how easy this thing is to work. All I have to do is hit Quick Connect, and boom. Now, my internet connection is secured, and let's say another advantage here is you can look at content in other countries. So let's say I want to connect to a server in Germany. Well, now my IP address is being run through a German server, and if I wanted to watch like a Netflix type service in Germany, well, now I could. All right, so there you go. Keeping your internet privacy secured really is as simple as that. Now, if you go to nordvpn.com/History Underground, you can take advantage of some pretty deep discounts on a 2-year plan, plus you'll get a month free. They also have some bundle deals that you'll want to check out on their website that I'm sure you're going to find attractive. So again, if you want to protect your online privacy and your internet security, well, nordvpn.com/History Underground.